Like most of us already know, ever since the release of Pokemon X and Y, the Pokemon we know and love have from that point been showcased in the 3D realm, ditching and never looking back at the 2D elements that the franchise was initially built upon. Even though the ways you could get creative with the design were now more limited, at least this change allowed Game Freak to have more breathing room thanks to now having the workload being reduced from 2 renditions necessary for a single Pokemon, those being the front and back sprite, to just a single model that fits every use case. Although all hints of 2D sprites were mostly eradicated with the entry in the 3rd dimension, some relics of the past still remained, holding the exact same charm that the sprites themselves held. What are these things, and what happened to them? Well, I'm sure you already saw the thumbnail, so it's time to take a look at Pokemon's menu sprites and how the last surviving Pokemon pixel art eventually faded away itself. But before we come to its demise, let's cover and reminisce about its supporting role for our imagination of the best Pokemon battles we've ever had by looking at the best, the worst, and all other special cases from each generation. Like with everything else related to Pokemon's history, let's begin with the good old and buggy Red, Blue, and Yellow. Just like you could expect, the first ever entries offer the wackiest assortment we could get. So let's go over what we do get. Now, due to the game's size being limited because of how big the games could be back in the day, specifically in this case being restricted at the 8 MB size at max, Game Freak had to get creative, in result making only 10 sprites to be split across all 151 Pokemon that were available. Since the amount that was needed to be made was so small, they made all of them to be the highest quality possible, right? Aside from Kirby Swimming, Angry Fireflower from Super Mario, and sentient reused overworld objects, I would say that they did the most they could with what was given. Oh, and don't forget to throw in our sweet summer child Pikachu into the mix, with his own exclusive sprite in the follow-up game Pokemon Yellow. But that's to be expected at this point. Unlike the 5 glitch sprites that can pop up if you even do so much as press the A button in the wrong way. Well, at least that isn't as big of a shame, unlike being a Pokemon that got a new sprite in Yellow, only to go without getting it used. If Pikachu got this special double use case, and even a whole ass surfing sprite to go along with it, why couldn't you throw a bone to these fiends? Good old Game Freak with their goofy decisions. Upkeeping the image of being an upgrade in every way when compared to RBY, Gold and Silver introduces us to a total of 38 icons for Pokemon, which based on the ratio from Gen 1 gives us much more than the amount of new Pokemon Gen 2 provides us, though it's thanks to 10 of them being the same ones as in RBY. Now, taking the chance to take a look at the actual menu sprites themselves, the ones that easily stand out when it comes to discussing the worst ones is the Clamp that poorly represents its list, the Egg sprite that's bad solely because of the awkward shape and missing spots, and the goofy replica of the poor man's Machoke. But despite picks that at worst can be categorized as nitpicks, let's actually look at some of the surprisingly clever and or cool ones. Sprites like Gengar look so good by utilizing the heavily limited palette to make the most of its ghostly look, while ones like Poliwag, Bulbasaur, Snorlax, Unknown, and more make the most out of the image size to perfectly resize their design into a compact sprite. Though, if I had to choose a favorite, the one I would give the title of the best menu sprite in Gen 2 easily would be the one that has a sprite solely dedicated to it and it only, Sudowoodo and its tree mimicry antics, which doubles as the exact same tree you interact with after Goldenrod City. Now sure, talking about tiers and classifications for each group and their dedicated sprite was fun for a bit. But now it's time to get some representation for every Pokemon. With the advancements in hardware that the Game Boy Advance provided us with, Pokemon starting with Gen 3 finally were able to not only each have their own unique sprite, but also a 2-frame animation and more specific colors that were closer to their design. On top of that, the size that the icons needed to be within was doubled from a measly 16 by 16 to a much larger 32 by 32, which were 8 pixels off from being the same size as the regular front and back sprites back in Gen 1, at least the smallest versions. With all this freedom, yet also new rules on the other hand applied, which ones from the now even larger roster of 386 Pokemon is more special than just the fact that they're finally an independent individual already. Going in order by the dex, Rachel figuratively and literally stands out with the brightest stand you'll ever see, which of course is not even close to how it looks like in battle. Besides the fact that Machoke finally got some justice, Kingler is hit with the same levitating curse due to its weird perspective shot like how it is in its Gen 3 front sprite. While Snorlax's personality is cleverly represented with the limitations the icons have, Sneasel, on the other hand, looks like it has the wildest shit shot up in its system, or is in the middle of a psychotic rampage based on its expression, or both. Ursaring, in the meantime, has not thought about its neck while scrolling TikTok all day. But then again, Smoochum is having an insane migraine, which caused its head to grow larger than such Pokemon like Scizor and Quagsire. The same thing I mentioned previously also applies to Slacking, and Mobile getting Intimidate is greatly showcased by the fierce chomps its hair-chomping thing or whatever has in the animation. But Torkoal gets done dirty by losing its constant smoke output gimmick. Kyogre and Rayquaza look imposing and awesome like expected, though when we arrive at our last icon, Groudon stands out in an unappealing way when compared due to its awkward, mashed up sprite. However, if we take a step back and look at the full picture, the catalog of icons can easily be written off as an overall success. Since we have gotten to a point where the formula for what an icon should be and should look like, while not really requiring any extra upgrades, let's rush through the generations with new sprites in the same style. Keeping everything mostly in the same way, let's skip any upgrade coverage repetitiveness and cover the new roster's highlights. Like you can expect from the cute little guys, the simpleness behind their designs makes for an easy transition into the minimalist style. And even though Carnivine usually amounts to a Pokemon that's just there for world building, the complete lack of thought behind those goofy eyes at least gives the PvZ reject some amount of brownie points. But at the same time, Toxicroak hasn't wasted any time to snack on all those accumulated snacks. Well, I guess he does look more like a frog now. Licky having the same derby expression as Quagsire exclusively for the menu sprite is unsuspectedly funny, though Darkrai has an unfortunate case of bloat. How is he bigger than all of the legendaries? Stepping now onto Unova's side of the field, we instantly can hand out praise to Samurott and probably the most detailed sprite yet, which for such a small size as 32 by 32 is pretty impressive. Amolga seems very similar to Pachirisu, even with all of the Pika clone shenanigans in mind. But hey, We can get some more proportion wackiness, with Hydreigon outmeasuring even the likes of the Purem Fusion sprites. But all of that comes to an end with the injustice that Genesect gets for its icon. All in all, I would say that by the end of the DS era, Game Freak for the most part got the most out of their limitations, yet still had some slip-ups in between. Let's see if an upgrade in hardware can change things. Finally arriving to not only an upgrade in hardware once again, but an actual change in how the menu sprites were handled, as well alongside the already known 3D model story. The icons actually ended up reaching the size of the smallest Gen 1 sprite size category, which would be something you couldn't really guess when comparing them. Not only that, but the amount of colors was also expanded, while also pretty much losing the restriction the other generations had, with the fact of needing to use only preset colors from a shared palette. Though all of these features came at the cost of losing their animations, hence becoming static sprites. Was this change worth it? Well, time to cover some more highlights to find out. Immediately showing off the new capabilities with the likes of Kanto's Mega Starters, except Venusaur, easily being able to say the same for most of the Mega Menu sprites, but besides them, the Johto Starters and Legendaries, Owen Starters, Slacking, Salamence and Metagross, Rayquaza, the Rotom forms with distinct colors, Palkia, Darkrai, and many more look much better than what was possible before. Yet, even with much less restrictions now in place, there are still some that get done dirty. Executor barely, if not at all, improves upon the previous icon iteration. Steelix looks like it's from a spin-off like Conquest or Mystery Dungeon, but greatly gets improved starting with Doras, and Toxicroak still having problems with bloat. But of course, what about the new additions? The duo of Dragalge and Clowitzer looks surprisingly detailed together, with the main legendaries as well. Yet Litleo looks like it ate spoiled meat, and Carbink is not only more squished than Stunfisk, but also is smaller than the likes of Dedenne. Although the new additions in of themselves don't really bring much to the table, the shift to the new style more than makes up for any lacking spots. Though maybe Gen 7 can bring much better stuff due to more experience and less required sprites. Now, although the Sun and Moon games pretty much share the same principles as the previous generation, at the end of its life cycle we did get a special development for the menu sprites, though only for a restricted group. But besides also mentioning the Poképelago minigame that showcases all the Pokémon solely in this style, let's quickly cover Alola's newcomers first. Rowlet never fails to disappoint, but quite opposite from that is something else. From a group of Beware, Wishy-Washy School Form, Comfey and Tapu Koko, which do you think has the biggest sprite? Yeah, I'm shocked too. Nonetheless, all the Lycanroc forms, Passimian, and most of the Ultra Beasts make up for the size goofiness. Though, before we're fully finished with this generation, there's still one more game that fits the list. With the release of Nintendo's newest console, the Nintendo Switch, the upgrades to the system's hardware gave even more room for games to improve in all of their aspects, especially graphics. And like we can expect, the first Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch already took the opportunity to take advantage of the new wiggle room. The expansion now allowed the menu sprites to be almost as large as Gen 1's largest sprites, being only 4 pixels off with their 52 by 52 size. With a size that's now more than 3 times larger than the 16 by 16 sized first menu sprites back in RBY, what are the results that we got from these changes? Repetitively speaking about Kanto yet again like clockwork, we instantly get a jaw-dropping impression with the final stage starters. feel the imposing presence of the Nidos, get justice for Executor, make all the legendaries very majestic, while now also being able to gush about many other icons. If only all of the other lines got such treatment for their final stages, then we would easily have the best menu sprite batch out of them all. I wonder for how much longer we can upkeep this rising quality though. Having now been familiarized with the inner workings of the Switch's hardware, and a massive cut to the game's Pokemon roster surely simplifying things, the overall quality of the menu sprites rose even more than previously imagined, now being 4 whole pixels larger than the sprites we saw back in RSC, more specifically outranking them with the 68x68 size, and by this point getting all the possible colors each individually menu sprite could want. Damn, we're still getting that much improvement for a thing that initially seems so minuscule? There's no way we don't keep going up from here, right? Already seeing that they continued on with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee's formula of sprites to make even more enlarged icons for the final stages after Gen 1, we somehow reach even higher peaks with the likes of unique sprites for the newly introduced G-Max forms, utilizing every single spot and pixel to make the best looking menu sprites to date. Putting together all the build-up and beauty of the G-Max sprites, that's what I call a solid roster of quality menu sprites. Although it's a shame we lost the 2D sprites back in the XY days, it's at least nice to have this great of a compromise. I mean, I can't even imagine how... Welp, add one more thing to the list that BDSP didn't mind ruining. Well, at least to be fair though, turning to drawings and 3D model renders like in Legends Arceus seems like a natural progression, especially with pixel sprites taking more work to make and having mostly only a single art style they can be used for, limiting its artistic use cases to a single group. Though losing that last smidge of pixel art left in the games still wasn't an easy pill to swallow. So just like that, since the shift starting with BDSP, the last we ever got, that's even vaguely related to the charming art style, has never been heard of since the drop. At the end of the day, menu sprites themselves can be coughed up as a long-running attention to details that wasn't necessary, though made the experience that much better by giving the Pokemon that much more personality on top of the already expressive sprites, which made the battles in our heads look that much cooler. But at the end of the day, even if they're just minuscule pixels in a kid's game, I'm glad I got the chance to grow up with the games that allow to expand my imagination that much more, in result giving that much more personality to the creatures that the whole franchise is based upon. Alright, enough sappiness. Subscribe and see ya!